Hey, what's happening, people out there in the podcast land, YouTube land? This is another episode of the craziness that lives inside my head. And if you ask yourself, especially those in the YouTube audience, is it raining? Yes, it is. But I decided to do this podcast in the rain. Welcome to the craziness that lives inside my head. This podcast is the continuation of I'm Retiring, Part 4. When I left in Part 3, I took a buyout at the American Stock Exchange in 2000. So from 2000, again, I had bills to pay, no longer was on unemployment, so I had to look for work. What did I do? I went to an temp agency to get temp work. I found a job as a temp. Only supposed to be, I think it was 6 weeks. It was a 6-week temp job at Stanford Advocate in Connecticut. But that job, that was the first time I had to commute to work. I had my car, my 1998 Malibu, and I had to commute to work. And I remember when I worked there, people thought I was crazy, living in New York, in the Bronx, and commuting to Connecticut. And I said to them, it takes me longer living in the Bronx when I worked at Wall Street. It takes me longer to get to Wall Street, taking a bus and 2 trains, than it did for me to just hop in my car and drive up to Stanford. That was something like a 40-minute at the most, a 40-minute drive, definitely a 30-minute drive, providing who's on the road, of course. So I worked for Stanford Advocate as a temp. But again, like I said, I had to pay bills, I got rent to pay. So what I did is went back to the temp to get a second job. And they did. They gave me a job to go to United Parcel Service. So I worked at the United Parcel Service part-time. I worked at Stanford Advocate part-time. So it was part-time day work. When I left Stanford Advocate, I had to drive over to Westchester and work for United Parcel. That was evening work. That ended, I think, around 10 p.m. And then back to the Bronx, get some sleep. I didn't have to get up that early to get to Stanford Advocate, but I had 2 jobs, 18 and 19. And you may say, well, you sure like to work a lot, but like I said, Mama always told me, if you want something, you get out and get a job and get it. And I like living in my high-rise, 1-bedroom terrace apartment in the Bronx, facing Manhattan. Well, anyway, that didn't last long. I used to work for the United States Post Office Service. Now, United Parcel, when I worked there, I think they were part of the United States Post Office Service, and I think they split them up way back in the 60s. So United Parcel was doing work, what we call back then, mail handlers work. It's all boxes and flats on a conveyor belt, and you sort them out to whatever in the bins. So that's what I did part-time there in Westchester. I'm going to be honest with you. I quit. It was just too much. But I was lucky because when I couldn't take it anymore, mind you, I told you it was 6 weeks I had to work at Stanford Advocate. The manager who hired me asked me, did I want to work permanent? And I said, yes, I would love to work permanent here. So I had an 8-hour job, plus it had benefits, it had health benefits and pension. So at the same time, I was lucky. I quit working at United Apostle, and I stayed at the Stanford Advocate. Now, like I said, that's 18 and 19. United Apostle was my 19th job. And I'm not going to embellish anymore on the numbers, because what happened with Stanford Advocate, they got bought out. And I think the Hearst Corporation bought them out from Times Mirror. And in the Hearst Corporation, when they bought Connecticut Post, I was contacted by one of the managers at Stanford Advocate, who has, how you say, dealings and with Connecticut Post, said they was looking for someone to work marketing management. I was a clerk in marketing management. My title was marketing research assistant. That was my title in Stanford Advocate. So I went to the interview for Connecticut Post, and being a black person, an older, mind you, I'm in my 50s now, an older black person, went to the interview, and this is the first time it ever happened to me in my whole entire life. They asked me what would I like my salary to be if I worked for them in the marketing department, because it was only going to be me in the marketing department. It's not like Stanford Advocate, there was 2 or 3 of us. It was only going to be me. And I thought about it. Mind you now, I was a marketing research assistant. I was only making $25,000 a year. And, I'm thinking, being a smart ass, I said, well, you know what? In my mind, I said, I'm going to double my salary. So I said to the young lady, the young woman, I said, I would work for you guys for $50,000. And she smiled and she said, well, welcome aboard. Just like that. Welcome aboard. So I got hired with them, and the guy who was doing that position was showing me how to do the job. And I found out from him, he was leaving. He was going to work for an ad agency, doing marketing for an ad agency. And they wouldn't give him his salary. That's what I found out. He wanted a certain salary. They refused to give him to him. So I'm thinking, I wanted $50,000. How much did he want? So I asked him, well, how much did you ask for? He said he asked for $60,000. And I thought about it, and I said, wow, they got me cheap. I could have asked for 60. Well, if I asked for 60, they probably would say no. Only reason I bring this up, because in all those years, like I said, that was my 18th job. In all those years, I've never, ever negotiated a salary. And on top of that, once I worked there for a couple of years, I got a promotion. Now, I got to back up again. I had the wrong company. It was Tribune who bought Stanford Advocate and Connecticut Post from the Times Mirror company. So now actually, believe it or not, they had a pension, and Tribune continued my pension from Times Mirror to Tribune. Well, Tribune sold Connecticut Post to the Hearst Corporation. Now, when they did that, and the rumor was the Hearst Corporation owned a newspaper in San Francisco, out west, and they had a reputation of canceling all paper products, hard copy, and putting everything online. So I heard that. So something say, the writing is on the wall. Maybe it's time for me to leave or do something else. Then when they did take over, and I come into work, and I had this woman sitting at my desk saying that she was my boss. And I looked at her and I said, well, I never had a boss. I ran the whole marketing. Well, she was going to run it. And these happen in corporations. Things like this happen in corporations. When another corporation buy another corporation, usually the corporation who's buying it usually bring in their own people. So that's when I was going to the gym, a lot, to lose a lot of weight. That's another story. That's for another podcast. And I asked my personal trainer about this situation. He said, why don't you become, first he said, why don't you become a personal trainer? I said, no, that's too much work. Then he said, why don't you become a massage therapist? So that's what I did. I looked into it. There was a massage therapist school in Westport, Connecticut. I went there. And the first day on orientation, you got to massage a person to give you an idea. So anyway, I did that. And like I said, I saw the writing on the wall. So that was 2009 when I started the school. And maybe 6 months later, 2010, I came to work on my birthday, 2010. And I was told on my birthday that they no longer needed my services because they hired that woman. Well, she came from the other corporation to do my job. Thank you for listening to the craziness that lives inside my head.